Hi, and welcome to Ward 13. Our guest today via telephone is Dan Koeppel, who, with Robert Meyer, MD, wrote the book "Every Minute Is a Day: A Doctor, an Emergency Room, and a City Under Siege." And as you can see by my sticky notes, I I was really impressed by this book. But Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hi. My name is Dan Koeppel, and I'm a writer. I live in Portland, Maine, I've been a journalist for about 30 years. This book is an interesting book. It's about the first few days or months of COVID-19 in New York, and my co-author, Rob Meyer, is not just an emergency room doctor in New York. He's also my cousin, and he was trained and mentored by my own father, the late Richard Koeppel, who also was an emergency room doctor. So it was really an unusual and very close collaboration between us that came out of our lifelong relationship.
It's interesting because, as you said, he's your first cousin, and your father, who was an ER doctor himself, gave Rob his first job. Dan, can you tell us what the difference? What is an ER doctor? An emergency room doctor.
An ER doctor is an emergency room doctor, and that is these days that is an official accredited specialty. So it's something you train for. You do a residency, and you undergo testing to become an emergency room or an emergency department physician. Now, in my dad's day, that wasn't the case. The emergency room was sort of a place where surgeons or other kinds of doctors moonlighted. We've seen a lot of changes. My dad was one of the earlier ones to specialize in emergency medicine as a profession even before it was recognized as a specialty. And these days, it is absolutely a specialty. You won't find non-accredited emergency room doctors in many emergency rooms in the United States these days.
Yeah, I found the book fascinating for many reasons, but the one about the history of emergency room doctors. I have my friend Gonzo here, an artist.
How you doing? It was a pleasure.
Hi there.
I listened to some of your book, and yeah, it's intense.
Oh yeah, it's
Very real, I would say.
amazing book. You know, Dan. Well, we could talk about that. We only have him for a half hour because
Okay.
the book was published yesterday. It's getting great reviews,
Awesome.
and I want to get him back and get him a Matt show, but we might never see him again. Just kidding. But back in the days when, I guess when we were kids, it was called ambulatory care, the emergency room, and doctors didn't have to even be certified. Now, your cousin Rob, 25 years as an ER doctor, which I guess in the old days that would be been unusual. You know, you might have done ER stint because your mentor requested to come, get the experience, whatever, and then you'd move on to something more remunerative. But his mentor, Rob, was a man named John Gallagher. And can you tell us something about John Gallagher, about who he was and where he created the practice that Rob still works at for after 25 years?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Gallagher is still around. He's very recently retired, and he was Rob's true mentor after my dad. And Dr. Gallagher is one of the people who was absolutely instrumental, not just in ensuring that emergency medicine was a specialty that doctors had to train for and be certified in, but also in creating a culture of the modern emergency room. You know, it used to be that many doctors felt contempt for people coming into their emergency rooms with things that seemed less than emergencies. There was a phrase called Gomer, and these patients were referred to as Gomers, which stood for "get out of my emergency room." And Dr. Gallagher was one of the first to say, you know what, our job is to serve the community. And when people come in here for a reason, that's because they can't get care anywhere else. And he expanded the idea of what an emergency room was for. He made it a place where nobody could get turned away. And that's especially important in a place like the Bronx at Montefiore Hospital, which is where the book takes place. Because the Bronx is the sickest county in the urban county in the United States. People don't have primary care physicians. And so the emergency, the idea of what is a medical emergency, is not just the heart attacks and the COVID-19 and the car accidents and the gunshots and stabbings and all that stuff. It's everything that anybody needs to come in there for. And Dr. Gallagher was really instrumental in helping these young doctors understand that they were privileged to provide service to their community, and that they not only had no rights to treat these people coming in with contempt, but that this was an absolutely wrong-headed way to practice medicine. And Dr. Gallagher deserves a ton of credit for shifting that pervasive attitude that dominated emergency medicine in, up until the 80s or even 90s.
Yeah, what's amazing reading the book, because at first, I must compliment you. First, the book has no fat in it at all. It's just a compulsive read, and it's focused. And at first you're thinking, by God, as it starts developing COVID, and they don't understand it. Or like with intubation versus proning, something as simple as proning, putting somebody on their side, and which was much more effective, how they're learning this stuff. What started striking me is here you are in which I'm going to use the word infamous, which I shouldn't, but the culture that I grew up in, I was born in 1959, the South Bronx became infamous about the failure of urban cities. I lived in New York in the early 80s, and Paul Newman made a horrible movie about the South Bronx. We won't get into that, but is the community, the dedication of the community that Dr. Gallagher tells his people, he's training, because he's training doctors just like Rob does, and he's telling them, you treat these people like they were like a relative of yours, rather, and to listen to them. And listening to them, they'll tell you, and I think your father, who trained Rob too, was a person that great empathy, a great listener. And you can read people, because they're not going to, you listen, and you can read them from their reactions. So what happens when suddenly people have to put on PPE to that paradigm?
Yeah, and this was a real source of frustration for doctors. The inability to communicate with patients because they couldn't look at them, they couldn't touch them, they couldn't approach them. This was intensely frustrating. It was. Obviously, with COVID, it was not necessarily a challenge diagnostically, because it was known what the patients had. But in terms of how to treat patients, how to communicate, how to make them feel cared for, which is just as important as actually providing medicine, X-rays, scans, all that stuff. How to make them feel cared for. So difficult when everybody is wrapped in aluminum foil. And when I was down there at the hospital, in those early days before PPE was sort of standardized, you had doctors walking around in what looked like beekeeper suits. It was crazy, and the wards were crowded, people shoulder to shoulder, and you couldn't see a face among them because everybody was covered, and it was so difficult, and especially for these particular doctors who have been steeped in this more personal, verbal, connected approach. It was very frustrating, very difficult, very emotionally traumatizing even.
Yeah, because by Dr. Gallagher and then Deb White, who was the head of Rob's, what would you call it, hospital, or it's the medical center?
Yeah, Rob's hospital. She was Rob's boss, director of the emergency room at Rob's particular branch of Montefiore. There were 3 or 4 major Montefiore medical centers
serving the Bronx, and the dedication they have to the community. I mean, like Rob, when you're writing Rob's story, which is an interesting thing too, when you email him, and then he's let me write that. You ask him about the first email he sends to him when I get through this. But that they're so they actually have seen, because poor people in the Bronx don't have primary care physicians. They've seen a lot of these patients before, and they bonded with them, and they bonded with the community. And suddenly, a pandemic the like that hasn't been seen probably since 1918-19 in the original flu epidemic. It really created a great deal of stress on everybody. So,
Well, my takeaway from listening, I didn't read it. I listened to some of the book, and on Gallagher, I like how he just didn't let any of the doctors act better than the patients,
Yeah.
and I think that translated into success. And you mentioned the leaning sideways thing, John.
oh yeah, proning.
The revolutionary technology that came from that learning is used today, where they put these people on their stomachs, and it's saving lives. And unfortunately, a few had to, to go. But from that knowledge, people are.
Yeah, when you read the book, Dad.
And not even COVID, it's just
Right.
ventilator now.
When you read the book, one of the things is all of a sudden these doctors that have been trained for all these situations, like an ER, everything that you see, and all of a sudden it's chaos, wasn't it, down there?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we have algorithm-based medicine now, and I think that's generally been a benefit. It's good fundamentally that you go into any ER in the country and your symptoms line up, and the best practices are usually performed on you. It's not like it was 30 years ago where, maybe you had a heart attack, maybe you got a stent, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Pretty much it's known what to do in most cases, and usually what's done is the thing that's been statistically proven to have the best results. But with COVID, there was no template. There were
Right.
no algorithms. And so it was old-fashioned medicine in a way, learning by doing. And the quicker they learned, the better it was for the patients. And they learned quickly. And I would argue that, as much grief as sort of urban hospitals sometimes get for their busyness, the chaos, the variety of patients, compared to the major suburban, wealthier medical centers, a place like Montefiore was so perfectly equipped to learn quickly, because
Right.
these guys are always thinking on their feet. They see everything. They're drilling for everything. They're doing terrorism drills. They're doing chemical attack drills. They're doing this natural disaster drills, things that the suburban hospitals, the wealthier hospitals, just aren't doing. And so at Montefiore, there was this culture of being ready for anything. And yeah, did it take a few weeks or a few months to figure it all out? Of course it did. But I think they could not have done it any quicker, and no hospital did it
Right.
quicker. And there were other hospitals in New York, you got to say, similar hospitals in Queens, in Brooklyn, that were all coming up with these same conclusions at the same time, because the doctors were working so hard, comparing notes and figuring it out as they went along, and they all came up with the answers around the same time.
Yeah, one thing reading your book is that an emergency room doctor of the new generation that Rob probably was the first generation of, because you could be an ER doctor in the 70s and not even be board certified, which is strange to think, but I just recently watched Patty Chayefsky's The Hospital, which is from 1971, and with a great performance by George C. Scott, by the way. And thank God we live in different times. But as much as these people, like Rob, when you're writing about Rob, is that he likes the variety, he likes being in there and being so intimately involved with the people, but suddenly they're overwhelmed with the chaos. And I want to get to, after I finish this, the idea of fear. But in the book, there was the creation of order from chaos. They managed this overwhelming workload, but while they had to cope with death, hopelessness, and survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is, yeah. But what about fear? Like, here's Rob, who is a fascinating person and who seems to be brave in any traditional sense of the word, and a person of honor. And suddenly he has to cope with fear, like he's a soldier on a battlefield.
And I think a lot of these guys say they weren't brave, and
Right.
because they were afraid. But to me, bravery is actually when you go forward, when you are afraid.
Yes.
And they were all afraid, and everyone handled it differently. And there were doctors, we heard of who retired, and there were doctors who used their vacation days. But most of them, whether it was Sean the orderly who went from sweeping up to carrying bodies, to the nurse practitioners, to everybody, they showed up, and some of them got sick, and they all, Rob told me, I said, how did you react when, colleague A got sick and you knew you had been working next to him for a week?
Right.
And he said, well, we rationalized it. I think, well, that guy, he was 2 pounds overweight, so he had a risk factor, and I'm not. So, they would come up with these absurd sort of mental gymnastics to find ways to say, it's not going to happen to me. They have to do that. I don't think any of them were sort of like cowering and then getting to the hospital door and saying, okay, got to suck it up and go in. They were finding ways to work through it, and whether it meant rationalizing, fooling themselves. But I think they also all just have an obligation. Rob, Rob and many of his colleagues, when I want to, hark back, just almost 2 decades ago when September 11 happened, and, when those buildings went down, Rob and his colleagues headed towards the fire. That's what their job is. So, they're emergency room doctors, and there's a reason for that. And I think most of them have whatever it is in their DNA that firefighters have, that soldiers might have, that all kinds of people who choose those kinds of professions have, that makes them run towards the problem and not away from it.
Rock stars.
That's built into them.
They're like fighter pilots, in the jets, which are a different type. My brother was career Air Force, a different type of animal altogether.
Thank God for them too.
Yeah, but the thing was that one of the fears they had, and one of the fears Rob had, was the responsibility towards his family and the outside community that because they didn't know really about COVID at the time, that they might infect other people. Mm-hmm. And how he has to cope with that, and the other physicians have to cope with it too. One person that Rob believes is one of his colleagues, who I can't remember. She's going to train to be a nurse, but she was so upbeat and positive in his mind. But then he talks to her, and she's really not that way. She is afraid too. But and they all worried. I mean, knowing Rob's family as I do, and I've known them all my life, and we're all there, since they've been a family. I can say for sure that there is no chance in hell that Rob's wife and kids would have allowed him not to go into work for fear of them. They're cut from the same cloth. But the fear for one's own family is not unjustified. I mean, as you know from the book, one of Rob's colleagues had a parent die of COVID, and another one nearly died. Right.
So these things are very real, and the guilt that some of these medical professionals carry, having seen their loved ones infected, and that's not to say that they infected their loved ones. I mean, Deb, for example, never tested positive for COVID. We don't necessarily know how her father and mother got sick. But I don't think, again, like these are the families of people who choose these professions, and I don't think any of them would say, stay home. They're just not built that way.
Yeah, that's the thing. Their training and the dedication, the people like John Gallagher and Deb White, who just throw themselves in there. They're dedicated to the community. And I just have to emphasize about community, because a lot of times when you go to a hospital, you feel, a patient has fear too. And, but they just, it's something like Rob thinks about retiring at one point, but it's not something you can do when you're in a metaphor in a battle.
Obviously, like Rob's a hero, but so are the family members, because they're
the family. It's
they're
sad.
taking it on the chin as well.
Tell us about what you have to deal with the family members. That was a very moving part of the book because, we've all heard about it. That people, you bring a parent in,
Oh yeah,
and you might never see them again.
like not getting to hug them and all that.
And then you never see them, and then you can't have
No
a funeral
funeral,
or
dude.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I want to talk about, about a little bit about, I think the answer to that is sort of talking about how the book was formed and when we decided that this was a book, Rob and I didn't really set out in our conversations about COVID to write a book. I called him early on because he's my cousin and I was worried about him. And as we talked and, it was obvious that the talks were somewhat cathartic, I started taking notes and, the sort of journalist notes for news sort of kicked in and we started to think a lot about how how to make this book work, and we didn't want it to be a medical procedural book.
Right.
We didn't want it to be like an episode of ER where it's all about what doctors do. And we didn't quite really know then what it should be about until it clicked on us that this is a book about, not just about grief, but about mourning and the absence of mourning. In other words, all these people who lost loved ones and who couldn't properly mourn. Because mourning is a ritual that humanity, it's what separates us from the animals in some sense. I mean, animals mourn too, of course.
Right, 10,000 years old mourning.
Yeah, but this is what was lost, really, in COVID. Not just the lives, but the ability to remember and to celebrate and to honor and memorialize. And we saw it over and over again how difficult that was. And that's what the book really hinged on, I think, was how well we could capture that and explain it. And make it not about necessarily about proning. I mean, all that stuff about proning and history of emergency medicine. I mean, that's important and belongs in the book and carries the book forward in a chronological sense, which is what that's the narrative framework. But the book is really about, it asks a question and hopefully answers it, which is, what do you do when you can't say goodbye to the person you love the most? How does that change the experience of death and the experience of survival? That's what the book is about, and that's what we hoped to capture in the book.
I bet there's a lot of people feeling slated, huh?
Feeling what?
Like slighted, like they didn't get their fair share, like when...
Oh, they couldn't see? Some of the people...
It can be residual, like this must still go on in their mind, like I haven't got...
one of the... scenario, I don't know what you call it, book scenes in the book. It's almost like watching a movie. Is that some of the people handling the bodies? Because first they just put them in a normal body bag, but then they had to use a heavy-duty orange bag, and the people weren't able to go in and see their loved ones die or anything. Some of the people handling the bodies would give them a last look.
This book was very in your face. It's very WTF. Very at all times. Like wow, very descriptive, man. Like you really set the table on that. And sometimes it's hard to hear too, but that it invokes emotion though.
That it does.
It was very intense. I mean, it was a very intense process, unlike anything I've ever really experienced as a journalist. I give credit to Rob for his honesty and also, it's really a testament to how respected and loved he is by his colleagues.
Yeah. That
they were willing to tell their stories to us and gave us permission to really tell these very intimate stories. In fact, I want to say that there were some folks in the legal department at the hospital who just couldn't believe that these stories were freely given. We had to convince them that they were, because and it's because of who Rob is, not just that he's been there 25 years, but because I think he's a trusted and trustworthy character. And we were very, very aware of how much trust was given to us in being allowed to tell these stories. And we have to be really, really, really careful and understand how delicate, these jewels that we were given were, and we didn't want to mess it up. We were aware of how easy it would be to mess it up, make it sensational, make it all about
right.
blood and guts.
Well, that's the good stuff, the inside scoop.
We had to resist at every. There was a lot of pressure to do that. That's the typical way.
Yeah.
We had to resist that at every step.
I'm glad you didn't. There's no fat in this book at all. In fact, I'd use it in a creative writing course to show how to write a book like this. We got about 4 more minutes. I just want to say what struck me is, and you've been talking about it, is as somebody that had to make a decision to pull the plug on a parent, which is about. I don't even want to talk about it, and you talk about it in the book, is the quality of empathy. John Gallagher taught Rob told Rob, or just in a conversation, you get it from your parents or you don't. And Rob did get it from his parents, from his mother, did he not?
Yeah, and then, that's a very key moment in Rob's life, in his first year of medical school. His mother, Barbara, is killed in a car wreck by a drunk driver, that was a galvanizing moment. It didn't make Rob want to be a doctor, but it did send him towards emergency medicine, and it was such a huge loss for him. But I remember his mom. I remember her kindness, and I think that for his entire adult life since then, Rob has been driven by this idea that he needs to honor who his mother was and make her proud, and I believe he has.
Right, for her to die, she was still on the gurney, but let's not get into the details. And I'm glad you didn't really go into a lot of details because it just reads with a certain purity. One of the last things I want to say is that one of the sentiments. I can't remember who it was. I don't have the note. Grief is indivisible. If you could share the feeling, it won't reduce how you feel. That is so true. I think of a John Lennon song where he says, nobody can feel your own pain, which is true.
Yeah.
In this book about empathy and the empathy and community that get them through, the grief and the
Yeah, it's a brilliant thing. I mean, that comes from Rob's dad, Leon.
Right. Yeah.
Duke. And, Leon is a working class guy. A Holocaust escapee. Grew up. Came here not speaking a word of English. With a school guidance counselor all his life. And for him to come up with that and to explain what it means, and it's so true and it means so much. And I'd never heard him say that until we started working on the book, and it just is really something that's so true.
Yeah, it is amazing, and I'm going to let you go now because I know you're going to be very busy, and I think you're going to be busy in the future, but I'd like to get you back. There's so much to talk about. But great, it's a great book, Dan, and I hope you all the success in the world for it. Okay.
Well, I've loved this conversation, and happy to do it again, and thank you both.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Brendan, could we show the background with both of them, with Dan and Rob? There we go. That's Rob Meyer. They're first cousins. And they're both mountain bike enthusiasts. Dan's in the mountain bike BMX Hall of Fame. He's a terrific writer.
Yeah, that book, I mean, he used to talk about, describing the brush. You know what I mean? Like the uncertainty, too. We know what we know now, and it's so easy to look back and say, but at the time, man, we didn't know diddly, and we were all scared. You can say what you want, but we were all scared.
Let's take a break for a couple minutes. I got a video. Then we'll come back and talk about that and anything else you want to talk about. But
Always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life. Some things in life are bad, they can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. This'll help things turn out for the best. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. So always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. Life's a counterfeit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's the joke, it's true. You see, it's all a show, keep them laughing as you go. Just remember the last laugh is on you.
Oh, yeah, Mike was on that, yeah. Oh, hi, and welcome back. And let's get a two-shot of me and Gonzo. There we go. So, what's up, Gonzo?
Back, baby. The dynamic duo is back. How many emails did you get to make this happen?
None.
None?
No.
Well, I've been getting emails, and people want Veronette back, but...
She's got her own show now.
Yeah, because you...
It's time for her to have her own show.
I think what you're doing is great, John. But that interview, that was one of your better ones. You could tell you were into it. You were emotional, and you probably read the book in one day, didn't you?
I read it in about, it's a compulsive read. You can read it really fast.
Yeah.
I've got so many notes and that about it, because I'm going to write a book review.
I was, when you sent me the link, I was walking my son in a stroller, and I was listening to, like, the sample part, which is a long sample. It's pretty good. Pretty descriptive, and I'm passing neighbors, and it's talking about these awful things. And they're just like, this is what he walks his son to? Like, as he gasps for air, and it's like...
Yeah, you think that, when you're reading about that...
Heavy
then
stuff.
It pulls back just in time. It's like a movie,
Right.
It doesn't get gross.
Right, you want to watch, but it's not like a feel good, but it's also not a feel bad. It's like you're getting insight on it.
Well, it's like the Bible. If you read the Bible, parts of, they really are general. They don't really go into a lot of detail. And that can be very effective rather than going into the clinical detail.
Wow.
Because it would be just too much of a downer. All these people dying. One of the points the book makes is they know they have COVID because they're coming in with certain breathing difficulties, and even though they aren't, they can't get the tests back quick enough, that you can come in, and one of the things was the oxygen level. If you go below 95, it's bad. It's bad, but 92, which I didn't know, is worse. But people would come in. They'd be like between 95 or 92. And then within 4 hours, they'd be dead. Their oxygen level would just go. Because their lungs, because of COVID,
Was it
was
the ventilator
filling.
doing it to him?
Well, remember, ventilators, they didn't have quite enough. And they were worried about people. When you come in and you're 85 years old, and you think, these people are just constantly coming in. They had to take a whole part of the emergency room and just dedicate it to COVID, which had never happened before.
When you say 4 hours later they were dead,
they could be dead that quickly.
would they be dead had they stayed home? Or is it...
yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's not like a procedure or something the hospital put them through. Was it?
No, Montefiore, I think, lost a third of its patients in those early days. Some of the hospitals lost 85%.
I mean, there is trial and error when you don't know what the hell
right.
you're doing.
Once you go on the ventilator,
it was like
that's pretty much your,
that wasn't
you know.
That wasn't the best thing, it turned out. Like,
No,
everyone's
but-
like, let's get more ventilators. It's like, well...
And they realized just by turning this guy who
That's
was
it.
heavy, that all of a sudden, but it was just the trial and error.
Yeah.
Because the guy should have not have been conscious, but he's talking to them, and he's like uncomfortable, so they move him, and then suddenly his oxygen level increases because they don't go into all the detail, but I'm
Probably-
sure it like the pressure took the pressure off the lungs, and they could
Probably
breathe.
almost 1 million people got saved because of
But
that.
they're talking about like the X-rays, like, oh, these are the worst. It look, it's like pneumonia.
And they're not getting the same...
It's full of pus.
They're not getting the same treatment. It's almost like when they're like on a battlefield in World War II or something, where they prioritize, can this person be saved?
That was
Or are
part
we
of-
going to
yeah.
stick them with morphine?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
morphine that's Bob Dole. He got so grievously wounded in Italy. When they put the M on you, generally they give you the M to ease you into death. And that's like if you watch Private Ryan, when he says, give me the morphine, the medic.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do. Everybody knows. That's it,
Give this letter to my wife.
Those things I've been in group therapy. Things like that really happen.
I'm
to people.
sure. Now that's a burden. And I get this letter to Kansas.
But that's in the book.
1943.
When you read the book, there are stuff like
Yeah.
the guy says, "Will you tell my wife or tell my
Yeah.
kids?"
I mean-
because they're not there.
I know.
And it's horrifying, but there is the part about the community and overcoming it that makes it a very positive book. And eventually, as they're tackling it, it becomes more upbeat.
That's why it really pisses me off, like, when people underplay this COVID thing. Like, wait, what happened? Like, the cold, the flu, all this crap. Like, because what's happening is this Gallagher guy and his family, even his kids.
Oh,
even his kids
Gallagher
are
got COVID and almost died, folks.
Like, of course he did.
And without extraordinary intervention,
How could he not?
would died.
They were talking about how when the final gasp, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's the most that's the most vulnerable the doctor is. So he's got to kind of get out of the way because he sees it coming.
Well, in the early days, they didn't even know to use the PPE, the personal protective equipment. And there are people that are just coming in dying, and they're giving them CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation because they've been trained to do that.
Right. Well, the first COVID guy didn't have COVID
Right.
in their eyes.
It was similar to AIDS.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, back in the 80s. The 80s, the early 80s.
AIDS, remember AIDS?
Oh, yeah.
Not me.
How old are you?
I'm old enough to not really have to deal with that.
That was about
But,
85 when it was really
I
started.
think I'm Ryan
recognizing.
White's age.
Who's Ryan White?
The transfusion guy.
Who's the transfusion guy?
The guy that John Cougar Mellencamp visited in the hospital.
Oh, well, I stopped listening to music when he'd already been
There you
around.
go. Ryan White was the
That sounds like
the
a
kid who
familiar
got
name.
AIDS through a blood transfusion.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And it was an after-school special. That's how I remembered it. Because everyone thought AIDS was only given, a certain
Yeah.
way, And turns out you can get it all kinds of ways,
Yeah.
but mostly one way.
But now it's been handled. They had to figure out what it was.
There was a
The guy from the Louis Pasteur Institute won the Nobel Prize.
There was a poll during the height of COVID. Would you rather have AIDS or COVID? And it was right down the middle. at the
right. I
time.
wouldn't want AIDS.
Because
It was
people
so-
didn't
it
know
was
what
like-
COVID was going to do to you, though.
That
We
wiped
didn't know
out
anything.
so many people in the baby boom
Oh,
generation.
yeah. I'm talking about 2020. People were asked that question. And most people said, I'd rather have that than this new COVID thing because we don't know anything about it. The unknown is one of the scariest things in the world.
That's actually in the book about the unknown, because the fear of the unknown. They don't know how. They're watching people, all these people coming in, and they're just dying in like several hours.
What's the scariest part on a roller coaster? The part where you're like, just go already. You know,
Well,
what I mean?
like-
You're at the top. You're like, is this gonna go or what? That 5 seconds is the scariest part.
I've never been afraid on a roller coaster. I love them. There's one now that's got a 150-foot drop, but I got a bad back. Brendan, can you go on a roller coaster?
But we're not gonna talk about that. Oh my god.
take my mind off things.
Why would you make fun of Brendan? What do you? Oh, the height thing.
No, Brendan. I was just talking to him because he has to listen before everybody comes in to my complaining about my bad back.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not very funny. But that
It's kept me off the air for a
the
month
unknown
or so.
is always scary in any scenario, which makes it exciting. Like when you like a girl and you don't know whether she's gonna say yes or no if you ask her out. That butterfly, that's the unknown. That's the fun part. Like in
What's
a way,
the butterfly? Butterfly
It's like-
effect?
because when you have an unknown and you have a situation where you don't know what's gonna happen, but it turns out right. Oh my God! Can you? Like that's why they portray love in movies. You're dancing on the moon. You're doing the tap dancing.
The movies are always,
But when it-
some working class slob snags some rich daughter, and that doesn't really happen. I got $20 to my name. I'm not getting any dates.
You don't know that.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah, we do know that, don't we?
Some
But that's
people are
okay.
lucky, huh?
Yes, that's okay.
Women are more forgiving when you're younger, and that you still have a chance to prove yourself. When you're an old fart like me, I'm
I
all
think
used
women
up.
are less vain about like looks than guys are, though.
Oh, that's
Like,
true.
Like you can get a little cash in your pocket, and you can get a decent girl. It seems to be like they'll overlook the
Particularly in California.
like attractiveness to a guy is different than what attractiveness to a girl is. Like settling down and like a good family man will stick up for his family. That's attractive to a woman. A guy likes legs and they're just dogs sometimes.
Before the Orwellian crackdown on the biosciences,
See, I
there
disagree about the Orwellian crack.
There's a cultural, there's evolutionary biology where women are sexually attracted to your average, like Arnold Schwarzenegger type. But, if they want, they're turned on by them,
Yeah, like
big
me.
jaw,
Yeah, me.
and all that. I don't know about that. But
You're Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
it's
Twins, the new show name.
I think of myself as Mr. Magoo, but particularly more I get old and more bald, and fatter.
Great reference.
But they
Yes.
also have an urge. They know that that alpha personality is not a very good in just being there and
Right.
being the father and that, because he'll run off with somebody else. Spreading his genes, but
Yeah.
women, human women are different than, and we'll just use the old-fashioned term, human women, than like apes and simians, and that they can hide their ovulation. When a monkey goes into estrus, things show, and that's when she attracts the man. So she can pass somebody else off as.
Yeah, and
you
they
know,
don't get shamed
father.
like a human would.
Well, in the old days, you lived in a tight genetic group, like a tribe. So if you bang somebody, they're probably his third, second, or even first cousin. So the kid probably looks like everybody else.
Well-
Nowadays, with the diversity, you could get caught.
Yeah.
More easily.
Well, nowadays you got to at least. I don't.
Hey,
you make a good point though. Like you watch the
How
National
did we
Geographic.
get there?
There might be one mate for many men mates, and it's kind of like survival of who's gonna fertilize. It's not about love. It's not about jealousy. It's all about getting your seed in there, basically.
Sexual love only lasts like 6 months. That's enough for the guy to do the deed, be around for the quickening. And
Talk
in the
about
old ways,
humans?
before technology develops, the uncles were important. Your descent came from the woman, not from the man, because the man probably is going to vamoose,
Like
and
peace
the
out.
uncles are more important.
Go out for a pack of butts and never come back.
It happens all the time.
It does.
Until with the technology they can find you. You can just cough and this phone will probably turn you in.
I have a feeling that
There's
you're
no
right
privacy anymore.
No, I have a feeling that we're all chipped, to be honest.
We're all
In
what?
some- like when the U.S. Marshals can find you
It doesn't
in
take much.
20 seconds, because they just can pull
Credit
up,
card,
just go
da-da.
brrr, Oh, he's at Hampton Beach at the Sun and Sand Hotel. It's like, well, how'd you know that in 30 seconds? It ain't because they did the research and did the timeline. Someone can pull up where you are at all times.
This, credit cards.
No, in here, bro.
You don't even need a snitch now.
You don't even have to be a chip. It could be some kind of like just an aura you put out where it can catch like a.
That's not far from probably what's going to be true.
There's no under the radar.
Well, there's going to have, the Chinese have had social credit for years, for 7 years, where they give a score. Like if you're a pain in the ass, if your publishing's on Facebook, well, it doesn't really happen in China. You get a bad score. You can't buy a plane ticket. You can't have a good job.
They do that.
That's going to happen in the United States.
But they have that in practice right now in China?
Oh, yeah.
That's
social
awesome.
Credit. Why?
How do they know everything, though?
Because you with your social credit, you'd probably wind up, if
I don't get enough credit for the crap I do, man. That's what I'm talking about. Give me some more credit. How do they know what you're doing good or not doing bad? The eye in the sky? Or references?
Everything. This is the greatest Judas of all time.
Right.
Everything's recorded.
Everything,
the algorithms, by what you look at.
Did you know if you go on Facebook Messenger and you write, like if you're mad at your wife and you write, I hate you and I wish you just move away.
Oh, yeah.
But then you don't send it and then you erase it and you're like, I love you and I think you're the best. And you send that. Facebook can see everything you wrote and then delete it. And then only your wife can see what you really sent. But Facebook gets it all.
Yeah, and they keep the data.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting because so many times people write something and don't hit that send button. You're like,
I have lots of emails like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're a special person.
Well,
you get a lot of feuds going in your life.
I don't have any feuds going.
Not currently.
Except with
We're
being
good.
on.
We're good, right?
I don't go down those paths.
Where did we go wrong? Oh, I know where we went wrong.
My back was killing me that day, and you looked at me,
I know.
And you knew it was because
Are you
my
out
back.
of your effing mind trolling for guests on Facebook?
I don't know why. I had prepared all this stuff, your background, everything.
Oh, my God.
But
you blocked me. You deleted my phone number for weeks. How bad can a back hurt?
Bad.
Weeks. Well,
I'm
I accept your
disabled.
apology.
I'm disabled.
I know.
Right now it's killing me, but I got,
Why don't
back into the breach,
Why don't they have, they have basic training for military people? What is it, 12 weeks, 14 weeks or something?
8 weeks for me.
8 weeks? Why don't they have 8 weeks coming back to society training?
They thought about that for war veterans, but they just wanted to get out. That was back in World War II.
Okay, so soldiers don't want to do it.
Would you want to do it? All you dream about is getting out from the day you're in.
Well, then don't dream about that. Make it mandatory where it sucks the first couple of weeks. Oh, man, I can't wait for this 8 weeks to be over. Then I'll be... But make them do it because it would be so... beneficial.
For over maybe
they just throw these people into the world without.
For 20 years, I used to have a dream that I was 300 some odd days shy of getting out of the army. Oh, that's what a terrible dream!
I get it, but that's different. Why don't you hook? All right, fine. Then hook them up with I don't know, a nice bar with a college town with girls.
VA do something about my back?
Or maybe R&R or whatever. Hook them up with some company, or whatever. But don't make it miserable. When you're counting down 300 days, you're counting down your tour pretty much.
Well, we're getting to the back. In the old days, they would give you an opiate for a short period to break the pain cycle. But they don't do that anymore because of politics.
Well, are you an advocate for that practice?
Oh, yeah. I think people should have... all this crackdown on oxycodone and everything, I think it's a bunch of crap.
Well, that's a...
Because Matt did a show about that.
I teeter on that one for sure. We all know somebody.
Very few people that have prescriptions abuse them. The highest that peer-reviewed research was 8%, and that was double of the normal rate. People don't friggin' abuse it.
But the problem with opiates is they just don't stay the same. Unfortunately, if it was something in that chemical where you could take one pill every day, that would be a different story.
But we're
that
not
one turns into 9.
They used to give them out much more profligate, if you know what the word. Too many. Do you know what I mean? Like if they gave me 30, which they always did, I'd only use 5.
Right, and you're broke, so you probably sold them.
No, I would never do such a thing.
That's the problem. That's what I'm saying. People
I don't
did.
know. I don't know anybody
I
that
say
sold.
you as in all of us.
That's bull. They just say that. Just
people sold their medicine.
so what? A
that-
handful.
More.
I'm supposed to be. So I and all the people that have chronic pain have to suffer because some unethical slob is selling stuff to some head, you know.
Are you saying that you're
Head
not
being
getting what
added.
you need because of that situation, though?
Oh yeah, we all know that. It's politics.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought you were like taking a personal stance on not taking.
Well, I
it.
have. Matt and Jenny that we've talked about this many times about what they do. It took years and years and years for people with chronic pain to be treated at the level that they need. And then all of a sudden, they just get swept away because politicians
and
are
money.
politicians.
Like, I mean, who made OxyContin? The blue guys.
I don't know, but they got the tort lawyers got them good.
But they were
and the attorney generals.
incentifying, like they were just being scumbags about it.
No, that's what pharmaceutical companies do.
That's what sucks.
They market
That's
stuff.
what sucks about things, you know. People just gotta have that 1% that just sucks, you know.
No, that's how the industry works, you know.
Yeah.
Live in a for-profit medical environment. You don't have that in Europe and other countries. Where one of the things in the book was
That is ridiculous.
their ER was different than most hospitals that are everything is seeking a profit. You know?
And like the doctors who are used to a certain lifestyle, now the wife likes to go to Bermuda every February. Now, if that doctor's not making the same amount of money, he can't go to Bermuda the next year.
Or
So now he has to be unscrupulous. And now that's where it begins. All these incentives, like,
and just imagine
why is the doctor incentivized?
he can't buy his mistress a new BMW.
Of course
every
not.
year.
But he could in 2007.
Well, you know, the Obamacare Act, the No Health Insurance Company Left Behind Act, really gave a big zing to doctors. There are no private practices in the city anymore. They're all owned.
Well, that was the whole thing. Like, we don't trust you to go to the doctor on your own, so we're making you. And if you don't, we'll penalize you on your taxes. Like, totally different topics, like taxes and medical. But
You
that's
should
how
watch
they had.
I'll send you a link to the movie. It's The Hospital from 1971. One of the doctors is all about his corporation and how to hide the profits and that. And he's a butcher.
Right.
But
that's because the pressure on him to make $3.4 million that year. When you make $3.4 million, it might be like you making $30,000. To them, it's not enough.
no, it's not.
There's overhead, more overhead. Now the pressure to make that exact amount again, if not more. So when you bring in $1.8 million, then you start putting fake bones in people and stuff that they did.
Oh, Medicaid
Real
fraud.
stories.
Medicaid fraud is incredible. We could do a whole show on that. Medicaid fraud and Medicare fraud. It's amazing.
Just scumbags.
But that's because we have this for-profit.
You're all
system.
scumbags.
Well, they're not. If you read the book, you actually have more faith in.
No,
in
I know.
doctors.
You know what?
Certain type of doctors.
I'm glad you said that. Well, I know we're running out of time, but faith in humanity. I was out painting last night, and somebody swiped 30 cans of spray paint from me.
Shh! Oh,
And walked away stealthily.
I'm sorry.
Within
I'm
an
the
hour.
one.
So within an hour.
Did you see it?
No
see
one
the person?
did. No one did. And
That's about $100. More than $100. That could be $150.
try like $700, dude. I had like.
Oh, you don't use
I
just
had like
the $5 ones?
I had like golden paint tubes at $25 each. Like, I said, I'm never running out of paint again. I'm sick of running out of paint. So I loaded up, put it in this one thing, and I'm the idiot that walked away.
Yeah.
And that's the takeaway. Everyone's like, well, why'd you walk away? Why'd you walk away? Well, what about the guy who stole it? Like,
See, that's the thing, though. You know,
But-
when you get older, it's on
what it
everybody.
does
It's
it-
on you because you screwed up.
what it does is it ruins my faith in humanity. Like, I try to help out the homeless community. And it turns out it was a homeless guy who was desperate. It got back to me in an hour who it was.
Did you get it back?
People were offering all kinds of services to me. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Just whatever. I understand his position. And I probably had it coming from my earlier days. Honestly. But, like, what are you thinking, buddy? Like, right in the open, like, I don't know. Did
you get it back?
It's back. Someone has it, and I'm getting it back.
Did you have to pay a bounty?
Dude, I don't even want to get into it.
Okay.
But I was willing to.
Yeah.
I was willing to give the guy who stole my stuff more money to get it back. But I don't know. And everyone's like, I'm torn. Like, you can't do that because then they'll just take it again. Like, you'll be, and I get it. I get their point. But I'm not trying to get in beef either. I just wanted my paint cans back. Call it a day. But what it does is it makes me want to help people. It makes me not want to help the macro because of a couple bad micros.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's normal.
It sucks, though. It's normal, but it sucks. That's all.
Well, you should live in like a nice little community in Vermont, but then nobody would be letting you spray paint.
There's someone there that sucks too, I'm sure.
Oh, indubitably, depending on where you live.
Indubitably. Shout out, Renan.
Who?
Our biggest interview ever. Rembrandt. Whatever, the guy that goes, indubitably. The homeless fella that came and we interviewed him, and he was pounding the table.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
And he climbed the roof and say, safe and sound like an Irish hound.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and I saw him later on. Indubitably. But he never would come on again.
Right. I think he probably got really into the interview and probably divulged a little too much.
Right, he doesn't want to be...
What a world that is, the underbelly of homeless in Manchester. I could write a book, bro.
You can come back and talk about it soon.
Nah, I think I'll just write a book because I can tell you everything.
Well, we're going to be signing off. We'll see you next week. I don't know what the show's going to be. Indubitably, the show will be on.
Will it?
Yeah.
Don't be late.
Take care.